Hey friends, and welcome back to the CyberSnap channel. Or if this is your first time here, welcome. This is just a casual little show where I like to talk about magic cards. And today I want to talk about the magic card called Worldfire, and specifically how you, you at home, can win a game of Commander with this magic card. So let's read it. It is 6 and 3 red for a total of 9 mana. It is a sorcery, and it says, exile all permanents. Exile all cards from all hands and graveyards. And then each player's life total becomes 1. So this is a heck of a magic card. This is so much of a magic card that at one point it was actually banned in the Commander format, and it was actually just recently unbanned. And when I say recently, gosh, maybe that was like probably a couple years ago now at this point, but relatively recently unbanned in this format. And one of the reasons why I want to talk about this card is because it's really cool. And tragically, I don't think I've ever actually seen it at the Commander table before. And maybe you disagree with my take that it's tragic to have never seen this card before. Maybe you're like, please God, keep this off of my table. I never want to see something like this. Because something that you may have missed about this ability is that first sentence that says exile all permanents does not say non-land permanents on this card. This is going to exile everything on the field, including lands, which popularly is a bit of a faux pas, to say the least, in Commander. A lot of people don't like exiling all lands, or destroying all lands, or mass land removal in general. And I think, in general, that's probably a relatively safe thing to dislike. It will, in a lot of cases, make the game go a lot longer. But what I want to talk about in this video today is ways that, or specifically one way, that recently occurred to me that you can reliably end the game by casting a Worldfire. So basically, this is going to set the game to sudden death mode. Everybody loses all of the cards in their hand, all of the cards that they have on the table, and everybody's life total goes to 1. And whoever can hit the rest of the players for just 1 damage after this card resolves is going to be the winner of the game. But that's going to be a lot harder than it may sound because you have 0 cards in your hand and no lands. So realistically, the fair way to win with this card is to cast it and then hope that you can top deck better than your opponents, because you're going to need to probably draw at least a couple of lands off of the top of your deck, and then a creature or some kind of burn spell that can then finish off the life totals of your opponents. Which is a pretty tall ask, considering that unless you're doing some random top deck manipulation stuff, you're just going to have to get really lucky to find those cards off the top of your deck. So how do you win with this card? Well, you pair it with another card that I see tragically little of at the Commander table. Let's take a look at Greater Gargadon. Greater Gargadon is also a very high mana cost card. It is 9 and a red, but forget that, you're never paying 10 mana for this card. The purpose of this card is that it has the ability to spend 10 for 1 red mana. So what you can do with Suspend is you can pay a red mana, put this card from your hand into exile face up with 10 time counters on it. And then normally the way that Suspend works is at the beginning of each of your turns, you remove a time counter from it. And then once you've removed the final time counter from it, it comes into play. And if it's a creature, it actually gains haste as well. The neat part about this card is it also has an ability that says sacrifice an artifact, creature, or land to remove a time counter from Greater Gargadon Activate only if Greater Gargadon is suspended. So you can actually activate this ability while it's in exile. If I'm not mistaken, that's probably one of the only cards that you can actually activate from exile. And this ability is no joke. You might look at it and think, okay, so I'm sacrificing my stuff to get this 9/7 into play earlier than it might otherwise come into play. It's the wrong way to look at this card. What this card actually is a 1 mana free sacrifice outlet that is completely uninteractable with. Your opponents cannot remove this because it's not even on the field, it's in exile. And notably, Worldfire cannot remove this while it is in exile, because it's already in exile. Worldfire is going to see it and be like, I wanted to exile you, but you're already there. So what you're actually going to do in this combination is pay the 1 mana, put your Greater Gargadon into exile. It doesn't even really matter when. You could do it early on in the game and just have it as a sacrifice outlet, just waiting. And this is a really mana-efficient sacrifice outlet. Again, it's competing with Viscera Seer, which is a black card, but is effectively the same thing in that it costs 1 mana and it lets you sacrifice stuff for free. But what this has actually over Viscera Seer, here, I'll pull it up. I think I actually have it right here. I pulled it up in EDHREC just to demonstrate. So Viscera Seer, 1 black mana, 1/1. Sacrifice a creature to scry 1. This is seeing play in 9% of eligible decks. In 234,000 decks on EDHREC, this Viscera Seer is seeing play. Good card, not going to argue with that. But let's look at Greater Gargadon, which is also a 1 mana free sacrifice outlet that cannot be removed in any way. 1 mana, free sacrifice outlet, hangs out in exile. 8,000 decks, 0%, because they don't want to go into the number crunching of figuring out what 0.1% that this is actually seeing play in. So just in general, kind of a bit of a tangent here. I think this card is actually just not seeing enough play, period. Though the biggest downside in comparison to Viscera Seer is that this has a limit to how many times you can activate it. Effectively, you can really only activate it about 10 times before you remove the last time counter from it. And then, oh no, you have a 9/7 creature that you paid 1 mana for. So it's not the end of the world. You can't use it for infinite combos and that kind of thing. But thankfully, that's not what we're doing with this combo that I was talking about. So let's get back to Worldfire. Greater Gargadon, you're using it as a sacrifice outlet. You played it earlier on in the game. Let's say it's hanging out in exile and it has like 5 time counters left on it now. You got your 9 mana up. You're playing a deck that can ramp somewhat efficiently to the point where casting 9 mana spells is not completely unrealistic. So you draw your Worldfire. At that point, you can sacrifice artifacts, creatures, or importantly, lands to take time counters off of this thing. So even if you don't have a ton of creatures or artifacts on the field, you can sacrifice all your lands because you're going to lose them to the Worldfire anyways. So you can essentially tap your, let's say you have nine lands on the table. You tap your 9 lands to float 9 red mana. You cast Worldfire. While Worldfire is on the stack, you maintain priority and respond by at instant speed, sacrificing however many lands and creatures you need to sacrifice to get this thing to 1 suspend counter. You don't want to take off all the suspend counters because then it's going to come into play before the Worldfire resolves. But if you sacrifice whatever requisite number of lands and permanents that you need to sacrifice to get this to 1 suspend counter, then what's going to happen is it's still going to hang out in exile with 1 suspend counter on it. And then your Worldfire is going to resolve and exile everybody's hand, everybody's board, bring everybody's life total to 1, except you're going to have a Gargadon in exile. So then you pass the turn. Your opponent's going to top deck. Maybe they draw a land. Best case scenario, they draw a land. They play their land. Next opponent, top deck. Maybe they draw a land and play it. Next opponent is going to top deck as well. You get where I'm going with this. Your opponents are going to be fumbling around trying to figure out how to rebuild their boards and get themselves back into the game. But on your very next turn, the last time counter is going to come off of your Gargadon. This thing is going to come into play with haste and ready to kill one of your opponents, because there's no way they're going to have a blocker in time for this thing. Take one of them out. Pass the turn. Maybe they draw a land. Really, realistically, there is a chance that one of your opponents top decks a land and top decks a 1-mana creature that they can chump block with. But that's pretty unlikely, and even if it does happen, you can just attack and force the chump and keep bashing your opponents with this Gargadon until they are very dead. They're not going to have time to rebuild. I guess the best case scenario is that they top deck a white mana source and then play like Swords to Plowshares or something. Sometimes that's going to happen. Sometimes you're going to get got. But most of the time, this Gargadon is going to handily end the game for your 3 opponents while they're trying to put their board back together. And that's basically what we're doing. Greater Gargadon, already just a really underplayed 1-mana free sacrifice outlet that your opponents cannot interact with. Put it in your decks that you want to be sacrificing stuff in. And then also, if that deck happens to run some mana ramp and can get to 9 mana without too much difficulty, throw a Worldfire in there as well. Because again, if your Gargadon's in exile, this is basically a win for you. I guess one of the biggest risks to this plan is not without risk. If you play your Worldfire, sacrifice all your lands to get your Gargadon down to 1 suspend, and then somebody counters the Worldfire, your game is pretty much over, and you're going to have to be sad about it for a little while. But if you are not new to this channel, if you've seen some of my other videos, specifically if you've seen my Slime Against Humanity deck tech video, then you will know that some of my favorite ways of playing Magic are by doing weird, big, inherently risky plays and gambits that might win me the game, but also might lose me the game. And that's very much what this is all about. So if that sounds fun to you, I would definitely recommend giving it a try. And that's pretty much all I have to say about this. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that you'll like and subscribe to the channel so you can stay tuned in for when I upload my next video. And I guess if you've stuck around this long, what I like to do at the end of my videos is a brief reading from this Magic the Gathering, I think Theros themed Oracle deck, and just send you off with a quick reading from one of these cards. And while I'm shuffling up here, I just want you to focus on your breath. I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose. Exhale. And just try and center yourself in this moment. When we're scrolling on social media, scrolling through that YouTube algorithm, it can get so easy to get lost in that. In fact, it's designed to get you lost in that. So it's important to be intentional about taking some time to center ourselves in the present moment. Even if that's just a few minutes at a time. And that's what I like to do these readings for at the end of the video, to remind everybody, including myself, about that. I'm recording this on January 9th, I believe. January 8th of 2025. So, Happy New Year to all of you. And with that, this is so cool. Okay. The card that we got right when I said Happy New Year is the Transitions card. I'm going to let you look at that for one more minute. Transitions. So this is Athreos, who is, if I'm not mistaken, one of the gods of the underworld in Theros. I believe that his magic card is both black and white, and you see him as this veiled figure riding on this boat. And I believe that his purpose on this boat is to take people from the world of the living into the underworld. And I believe the underworld is just a representation, and this is sort of playing back into Greek mythology as well, but I believe the underworld is more a representation of the afterlife and death than it is necessarily a parallel to hell as more Judeo-Christian traditions would see it. So I think what this card really represents is the concept of death, but not death as an ultimate end so much as a big change. And I think that that's one of the best ways that we can look at the concept of death, is not an end, but a change or a transition. And so in a way, the new year is a death of sorts, a death of 2024, and simultaneously a birth of 2025. And with that, thank you so much for sticking around through all my rambling. I hope that you make it the best 2025 that you possibly can. Take care of yourself, and hope to see you in the next video.